The story begins with a girl named Sue, as her father tells her that he's actually a god from the heavens, and her mother is from the monster realm. She thinks this should make her overpowered, since she has the blood of a god and a monster, but her father tells her that her two halves perfectly offset each other, so she's just a human. Sue finds this story hard to believe, and asks her mother about it, but she confirms that her father is telling the truth. They tell her that since she has finally found a job, she is capable of taking care of herself. They note that they have been stuck in the mortal realm for too long taking care of her, so it's time for them to have a break. They kick her out, telling her to be safe, but she breaks back in, demanding a better explanation. But she gets embarrassed seeing them cosplaying, but they explain that these are the clothes they came to the mortal realm with. Sue loses her mind, and she runs off while crying. We see her sitting alone on a bench, but a cat approaches her, and she thinks he must also have been abandoned. She instantly feels better, but the cat runs off and she goes after it. She's approached by a real estate agent, and he offers to help her find a place to live. He shows her a number of options, but she has a problem with every place. The agent starts to become depressed, but another man tells him he will handle her. The cat appears again, and the agent mentions that it's a stray that likes to play in the area, but this instantly convinces Sue, and she signs the contract immediately. The agent laughs like a madman, and the contract suddenly glows, revealing the two men in strange outfits, and the agent tells her she's now responsible for the both of them. Sue wonders what's going on, and while the agent is monologuing, we see she has escaped. She's exhausted from running away, but the cat once again appears. She apologizes for being unable to give it a home, but it suddenly turns into the man from before. She tries to call 911, but her phone turns into the agent, and she blows him away. A god named Fu suddenly appears, calling her the Chosen One, and he reveals he's her new landlord. She calls herself a nobody, thinking she's not suited to be the Chosen One, but Fu thinks that even though her god and monster powers offset each other, she's still special. Sue thinks that the trio must be hired by her parents, so she demands to speak with her mother. The agent makes the call to her mother, and he acts as her phone, but her mother is about to get on a plane. Fu explains that the gods decided to transform into objects, while monsters assist them. He introduces the agent Tian as her phone, and Deke as a cat monster, telling her she must assist them in understanding the needs of the people in the modern day. He mentions how he got into real estate a few years back, but the tenants have become exceedingly picky, so he wonders what humans want. Sue refuses to mess around with them, but Fu reminds her she's signed the contract, saying there are consequences if she breaks it. She doesn't seem to care, but lightning hits Tian, and she immediately promises to work hard. Fu notes that she will be rewarded for helping the heavens, and this gets her interested, but it turns out to be just seeing more objects turning into humans, leaving her devastated. The next day, she wakes up in her room and wonders what happened. She recalls that she was chosen to guard the three realms because she's the daughter of a god and a monster, and she's ready to start her new life, but she sees the gods gathering in her living room. Tian wakes up, but he realizes that the house is empty, so he panics, thinking they were robbed. But Sue explains that she sold everything because the house was crowded, and she just didn't sell him since she's using him as her phone. Tian reminds her that she's the chosen one, so it's her duty to welcome the gods and monsters who enter the human world. He explains that everything has a spirit since ancient times, but humans always invent strange things, so the gods need to understand everything about the human world. They start arguing, as Deke appears, and he wonders what they're talking about, so Tian explains that she sold their friends without permission. But he thanks her, and Sue reveals that this was their deal, so now they can go their separate ways. Tian wonders why Deke betrayed him, so he explains that he doesn't want to work, and Tian curses him. She wonders what they're talking about, but they explain that it's none of her business, so she gets angry, and Tian reminds her that humans are slaves to their phones in the modern world, so he's basically her master. She wants to hit him, but she doesn't want to break her phone, and he explains that she can return to her normal life after they complete the mission. But Sue mentions that she doesn't know what they want, asking them how they want to experience the world of the living. Deke explains that he has been living in the human world for a few years now, so he offers to show them. We see Sue in a park playing with other children, but she realizes that Tian is treating her as his child, so she becomes angry, asking him why she's playing with sand. He thinks that's what humans do, and she's about to punch him, but she suddenly stops. He boasts that she doesn't dare hit her master as she thinks about how much a new screen costs. They visit a club, and Tien mentions that he wants to experience the lives of young people. So they stay up all night, and Sue is exhausted, but Tien mentions that he had fun, but he suddenly starts vomiting. They go to a quieter place, and she wants to ask something, but Deke keeps telling her to be quiet. So she gets annoyed, and wants to leave, but Tien reminds her that the mission isn't over yet, and they need to see what the life of a mortal is like, so they want to watch her using the toilet. But Sue refuses, as she throws a table at them, and Tien thinks she's being rude, reminding her that he's her master, but she tells him that she wants a normal phone. He thinks she doesn't know what she's talking about, and he mentions that her cell phone improved because of him, saying it's indestructible. So she punches him, and he transforms, but she continues beating him up, and he returns to his human form. Deke decides it's his turn, so he confronts her and demands tea. She refuses to obey him, but he transforms into a cat, and she can't resist his cuteness, so she gives him what he wants. She starts cuddling him, but he transforms again, saying he won, but she starts strangling him, so he changes back, and she doesn't let him go. After that, Tien starts serving Sue, saying they need to continue the mission, and she thinks there's a way to understand how mortals live. So she prepares snacks for everyone, and they start relaxing, as she shows them the life of a couch potato. Sue wakes up, and Tien asks her why she got up so early, but she ignores him. She brushes her teeth, and the doorbell suddenly rings, so they open it, but they see a group of gnomes. They enter her room, and Sue gets angry, because they're throwing dirt on the floor. They make a piece of land, and Fu appears, so she wonders what he's doing there, and he explains that it's just a routine inquiry. Tien tells him that the mission is going well, and Sue is showing them the way of the mortals. He asks her if she's comfortable with the apartment, and wonders if she wants anything, so she asks for an apartment closer to her work. But he tells her that isn't possible, saying humans are insatiable. He decides to leave, but asks her to complete the mission, as he warns her that she can't deceive him. So the gnomes collect the dirt and leave, while Sue wonders what just happened. She prepares to go to work, but Tien wonders what she means, so she explains that she has a job. He realizes that she does the same thing every day like Fu, so he thinks she's amazing. He wonders why she doesn't spend her time having fun instead, but she explains that she can't, because she's obliged to go to work, so he thinks humans are strange for doing something they don't want. She prepares to leave, and Tien decides to follow her because he's her phone. But Sue explains that she can't bring him like that, so Tien reveals that she is the only one who can see him while he's using his current form. She wonders how he controls it, but he says she can't, so she hits him, and he tells her he will obey her orders. She threatens to sell him, but he mentions she needs him, so she slams the door and leaves, but she changes her mind, telling him to join her. Tien is excited to see Sue working, and he watches her talking with others, thinking work makes people happy, but they turn into zombies as they enter their office. He wonders what's happening, asking Sue why they're doing this, but he senses a mysterious presence above her. He realizes that it's controlling everyone, thinking humans live in misery. But a notification suddenly arrives, which mentions that Sue has received her payment and she's purified by a strong energy. A light appears from everyone's phones, and a complete transformation happens, causing them to become happy. Sue's coworkers try to invite her out, and she keeps refusing, but Tien wonders why she doesn't want to join them. So she explains that they always forget the suffering they go through after receiving their payment, like a cycle of death and rebirth, but she goes to work to free herself from this cycle. He receives several notifications, revealing that Sue used her payment to buy stocks, and she tells him that nothing is real. So Tien thanks her for her guidance, but he ends up going bald as he reaches enlightenment. We see Tien frightened in a corner, as Sue scolds him for waking her up early on the weekend. He cries on the couch, and Deke thinks humans are merciless, so Tien warns him that he might get beaten if he talks like that, but he tells Tien to get a grip. Tien explains that he just wants to see her happy, so he does his research, wanting to know what makes a selfish person happy, but Sue suddenly appears, and he gets hit again. He wonders what he has to do to please her, and he hears an inner voice speaking, realizing that every phone has a secret power, which can solve all problems. He calls for Siri, and they go to an app store, as Tien explains that Siri told him how the place will help him achieve his goal. Moments later, Sue wakes up, and she opens the door, but a group of women storms into her room. She wonders what's happening, and Tian explains that they're the new apps he chose for her. A woman tells her that she needs to have lunch, as another one suggests picking out new clothes for her. The girls keep fussing over her, so they think she's angry, but we see that she's actually loving it. We see her chilling on the sofa, as the apps give her everything she needs. One of them wants to show videos to Sue, and asks for access to the camera, but the video app tells her to not worry about that, since she's better at finding videos for Sue. She asks for access to the contacts, but another app doesn't think it's a good idea, since she might accidentally send photos to her contacts. Another app suggests to try out new filters, and shows that it also works with animals. Sue thinks it's cool, and another lady mentions that the others still need her to post their photos, and she also asks for permissions. Sue allows it, so the others keep asking her, but another app suddenly appears, and Sue wonders who she is. So she sings about how great a phone manager is, but Sue becomes annoyed, and decides to get rid of her, so Deke deletes her. The filter is annoyed for not getting the permissions, but she's happy that Sue got rid of the phone manager, so all she needs to do is persuade Sue, explaining that all of the apps want authority, so the war is about to start. Sue is playing a game, and the gaming app offers her prizes if she buys the VIP pass, so she decides to do it. The app offers more products, and Sue keeps buying them, but she realizes she spent too much, so she becomes upset. She orders Tian to get rid of the gaming app, but he's overwhelmed with ads from other apps. The apps keep seeking her out, and this drives her crazy, so she decides to retreat with Tian. She notices that they stopped, as if they were trapped by a force, so Tian explains that they can't leave the area, because they need the Wi-Fi. They beg Sue to take them, and the filter suggests that she take one of her sisters, because she doesn't care if it isn't her, but we learn that it's just a plan to make Sue feel sorry. Sue asks Tian what to do, so he suggests that she choose the apps which can have access to her mobile data, but Sue thinks it's expensive, so she decides to take just a few. The filter thinks she's been chosen, but she hits a barrier, and Sue explains that she'll only take the 2 girls with her. The apps have never seen them before, realizing that the girls aren't one of them, and Sue explains that they're princesses, before walking away with them. We see Sue walking with her friends, and they see a dog mascot, so they take a photo with it. The dog asks them to use the discount coupon, and they refuse, but Sue sees a girl sweating inside the costume, so she decides to use it. Sue returns to her house, where Deke sees her photo, so he asks her where she took it, and she explains that it was down the street, so he rushes there. He sees the dog sitting, so he asks why it didn't come to find him. The girl doesn't understand what he's talking about, but she blushes, and thinks he knows her, so she removes the costume. But Deke keeps talking to the dog's head, and Sue suddenly kicks him. She apologizes for his behavior, but the girl recognizes her, and thanks her for the help earlier. She explains that she needs to do something and leaves, as Tian arrives, and the costume transforms into a dog. Sue wonders why he isn't a man, so Tian explains that an immortal dog is still a dog, but Sue has no idea what he's talking about. Deke wonders what happened, so the dog explains that he was sent to Earth, but he was immediately attacked by other dogs. He transformed into the costume and waited for someone to pick him up from the streets, but nobody wanted him because he was too dirty. Tian thinks that's really sad, but Deke wonders why the dog didn't look for him. So he reveals that the girl took him in, and she took care of him, before using him to attract people, but she never abandoned him. Tian thinks she's a good girl, and Deke thinks it would be better if the dog went out with her in his original form. The girl returns, but she suddenly walks away, as they realize that she's afraid of dogs. So the dog starts crying, and they decide to help him, so they go to a square, and Deke shows him how to be likable, and all the girls like him. He asks the dog to try it, but he scares everyone away, so he becomes depressed. Tian thinks it's because he's a dog, and this only works with cats, so he has an idea, and asks for their help. We see them in disguise, and they pretend to rob the girl, but Deke can't remember his lines. Tian scolds him, and the girl decides to leave, but she encounters the dog on the way. He tries to save her, but she runs and starts crying, begging them to protect her from the monster. So he becomes depressed, and Tian thinks it's his destiny to be alone. Sue explains that everyone says milkshakes make her fat, but she always drinks them anyway, because the flavor outweighs her fear of gaining weight. So she thinks the dog should overcome the girl's fear with happiness, and we see them running together, but she's actually running away from him. Sue is drinking a milkshake, and she sees a girl on a billboard talking about confidence. She explains that she used to be fat and didn't believe in herself, so Sue thinks it's another typical story. But she realizes that the girl was the one wearing the costume, and she explains that she lost weight by running to overcome her fear. Sue can't believe it's the same girl, so she destroys her milkshake and starts running to lose weight. The next day, Sue prepares all her snacks to watch her favorite TV show, and she starts eating everything, as Deke wonders if she's serious about losing weight. Tien thinks she's doing aerobics with her mouth, but Deke reminds him that pigs are still fat, and she suddenly hits him. Tien thinks he shouldn't compare her to pigs, even if she does nothing but eat all day, so she beats him up. She continues watching her TV show, but an old man suddenly appears, and he begs her to stop eating. She wonders who he is, so he reveals that he's the scale she bought in the past. She asks him to leave, but he keeps insisting she stop eating, so she becomes furious, and she attacks him, but he manages to block. He reminds her that summer has arrived, so she realizes that the monster will appear, and she becomes determined to lose weight, but she immediately gives up on her goal. She decides to take a break to cook something, but the old man begs her to stop, as Sue explains that she can't lose weight on an empty stomach. He gets frustrated and throws himself at the wall, but it breaks her stove. He blames himself for breaking his master's belongings and tries to punish himself, but she begs him to stop and promises to lose weight. Sue goes to the park, where she starts doing her workout, but we learn that she's just imagining things. The old man yells that this isn't how you lose weight, but she explains that the brain dominates the body, so all she needs to do is think she's training, and she will burn fat. The old man can't believe what he's hearing, and he throws himself into her refrigerator, as Sue tells him not to destroy her apartment. She starts doing yoga, but the delivery man appears, and the old man sees him as a threat, so he decides to eliminate him, but Sue stops the old man. She says goodbye to the delivery man, and drinks her milkshake, but the old man thinks she's deceiving herself, and he decides to use his last resort. He approaches Sue, and lifts her shirt, so the room starts to glow, revealing her stomach. So she becomes furious, and she transforms into a monster, saying she will take them to hell. She forces them to exercise with her, as she continues training like a madman, and she appears in front of a fat monster, blowing it into pieces, and putting it in a cage. She walks away, but the monster reminds her that they will always meet again. She finally manages to lose weight, and says goodbye to the old man. At night, Sue returns to her old lifestyle, and Tien wonders if she won't continue her diet. But she explains that fat and humans are like yin and yang, and the secret is learning to live in harmony. Tien notes down her teachings, but Deke thinks she's just lazy. Sue goes to work on the subway, but she's bothered by all the noise, which is driving her crazy, and Tien notices that she has high physical endurance, but the noise is like a magical attack. She wishes for headphones, so Tien hands her some, and she puts them on. She starts listening to music, as everything around her transforms, and the subway becomes peaceful. She enjoys the ride, but a child snatches her headphones away, ruining her moment of peace. She demands that he give it back, and the child becomes nervous, so Tien asks her to calm down. He ends up destroying the headphones, as his mother scolds him, so he starts crying, and Sue has no choice but to endure the noise. She arrives at work, thinking children are the worst, but Tien thinks she should be more patient with them. He suggests that Sue buy new headphones, and she finds it suspicious, but he reminds her that she needs to put up with the noise at the subway every day, so she decides to buy it. She receives a message that her package has arrived, and she can't believe how fast it's been delivered, so she calls Deke and asks him to pick up the package for her. Sue uses the subway again and arrives home exhausted because of the noise. She opens the door, but sees two children inside, so she starts to get nervous, but thinks her mind is just playing tricks on her because she's tired. She opens the door again, and she realizes the children are gone, but she discovers her headphones opened, so she curses Deke, but she can't stay mad at a cat. Tien introduces her to her headphones, but they transform into the children. He explains that they're his nephews, and he thought it would be a good idea to bring them, but Sue suddenly attacks him. But he manages to protect himself, telling her that there's no need to be afraid of children, since he can show her how to discipline them. But they suddenly charge at him, and he's unable to keep them under control, so she mocks him, saying he can't discipline children. He assures her they're just excited, and she tries to ask for a refund, but they keep pushing him until he collapses. The children beg her to let them stay, and Sue finds them cute, so she decides to adopt one of them, but the other one explains that she can't separate siblings. So Sue lets them stay, asking them to behave, but they decide to celebrate with fireworks, so she stops them, and she becomes upset. So she tries to wake Tian to send them back, but he explains that they will behave, and he orders them to apologize, so they tell her it won't happen again. She decides to let them stay, but asks Tian to teach them the rules, and she goes to wash her face, thinking they will be fine with him, but she's worried that he might teach them something strange. Tian tells them that humans need tools to survive, and he explains that they're the perfect weapon to fight noise, saying headphones are also important for avoiding conversations. But they keep messing around, asking him about the appliances, so Tian tells them to stop, but he ends up getting exhausted, and the twins wonder if everything in the house has electricity. Sue takes a bath, as Tian explains that the humans also use gas, but the children mess with the heater, and she realizes that the water is too hot. So she asks them what they're doing, and finds the children destroying the house, because Tian can't keep them under control. So she scolds them, but they explain that they just want to learn about human life, asking her to give them a chance, but she's already had enough. So she wakes Tian to get a refund, saying she doesn't like mischievous children. The twins look sad, so Tian warns her to stop, but they start crying, and she asks him to stop them. But Tian explains that children are too strong, so no one can stop them when they go on a rampage, thinking the only way is for someone more mischievous to appear. But Deke appears behind the children, and he prepares to attack them, forcing them to behave. The next day, the subway is noisy again, and Tian calls them to fulfill their duty. They had a conversation last night, explaining that their purpose is to make the world quieter, not to stir it up. So they apologize, as Sue explains that learning from mistakes is an important step in growth. They wonder what she means, so Tian explains it's like leveling up, and they get stronger each day. Sue is satisfied that they're behaving now, but they explain that they found a better way to perform their duties, saying offense is the best defense. They transform into speakers, and start blasting her music, and she apologizes to the others, but the twins think they're doing a great job. We see the trio resting, but Deke decides to leave, so Sue asks him where he's going. But he ignores her, so she's irritated, asking Tian if he knows where Deke goes every day. He tries to calm her down, but she explains that Deke is making her feel like a mother. Tian tells her to play with him, but she refuses, so he explains that games will make her happy, and since he's a high-ranking player, he can carry her, so she decides to do it. He helps her sign up for the game, and she decides to use a ridiculous name, but he spells it wrong, so they fight over the keyboard. They choose a name by accident, and he thinks she's angry, but she actually likes it. They log into the game, and Tian shows her the basic moves, but she shoots him dead. He tries to teach her how to jump, but she falls into a lake, and she ends up dying. He keeps trying to teach her how to play, but she's so bad that they can't even get past the tutorial. He realizes that he can't carry her, but Sue is excited, thinking she's doing well, so she suggests skipping the tutorial because she wants to defeat other players. Tian thinks this isn't possible, but she insists on playing, so he devises a plan to infiltrate the other team. He thinks the only way for her to win is to join the enemy team so that he can eliminate the other players with his partner before betraying him in the end and surrendering to Sue's team. They start playing, and Sue's partner is called Bleach Blossom, so she thinks it's a girl. Tian explains that girls are good players, and some can be almost as good as him. But the girl kills him in the game, so Sue calls him a noob, and her partner kills the rest of the participants alone, leaving Tian shocked. Sue decides to go to bed, but Tian can't accept it, and he asks for another round. They play again, but Tian keeps losing, and Sue thinks he should stop, but he refuses to quit until he wins. We see an internet cafe, and a boy sees the person playing as Bleach Blossom, thinking he's amazing, but the boy sees Sue doing nothing, thinking he must be cheating. But the owner of the cafe appears, and assures that he isn't, but the boy thinks it's impossible to be that good. so she explains that he's the legendary player who never wanted to become a pro gamer, and we see that it's Deke. The boy begs to play with him, but he refuses, and the woman explains that he doesn't team up with good players because he wants the game to be challenging. She explains that his partner is a total noob, but for someone like him, this makes the game more interesting, so the boy thinks he's incredible. Tien keeps going for another round, and he almost wins against Deke, but he still ends up losing, so he's now frustrated, and he promises to get revenge. But he continues losing to Deke, and the boy feels sorry for him. The owner tells the boy to help him, thinking the only way to win is to attack all at once, and she promises that the winner gets a free night, so everyone decides to try. The owner asks Deke not to lose, and he asks for a glass of milk. Tien faces him, and he asks the other players to focus only on Deke, but they explain that they already know, telling him that they have decided to help him, and they're all determined to defeat Deke. The cafe owner realizes that Deke is more excited than usual, and he explains that the guy he's playing against reminds him of a stubborn person who once saved him in the past. The sun rises, and Deke returns to Sue's apartment, so she wonders why he was away all night. He goes to sleep, and the cafe owner thinks it was a great night for business, knowing she was able to make a killing. Sue goes to grab her cell phone, but Tien is exhausted, just like the players at the cafe. She arrives at work, and people are commenting about the game last night, but she thinks the game is easy, promising to carry them next time. The next day, Sue discovers her sofa is covered in cat hair, so she cleans it, but Tien explains that she needs to clean the whole house. But she tells him that cleaning is an important activity for understanding the human world, so he starts cleaning, while she just sits on the sofa, but she suddenly hears a scream. He points to some antennas, so she freaks out, but she thinks it might be her hair. He tells her it's moving, and we see that it has a head, so she starts crying, realizing it's a cockroach. The two look for a new apartment, but Deke mentions it's just a cockroach, so they team up to defeat it. They try stepping on it, but it keeps dodging, so they decide to attack together, and the cockroach sees its whole life flash before its eyes. But it refuses to give up, and it suddenly flies away. Sue and Tien are terrified, and Deke tries to catch it, but he misses. It lands on a wall, so Sue thinks about burning the house down, but Tien asks her to use the cat. So she grabs onto Deke and uses him to attack with all her might, but the cockroach escapes again. It lands on the ceiling, so Tien shows a technique for catching cockroaches, and she decides to try it, but Deke is unconscious, so they freak out. She tries to use Tien, as he explains that he's not a cat, but he manages to catch the cockroach, and it turns into a man. Deke explains that he's the self-proclaimed king of the monsters, Mr. Cockroach, but Tien finds him disgusting, and Sue wonders why he can transform into a cockroach. Deke explains gods transform into objects to understand humans, but monsters turn into animals to get human attention, which is the source of their strength. Roach explains that he came to see the Chosen One to guard the three realms, but he's disappointed that it's just a human. He thinks Deke is weaker, but Deke thinks Roach is jealous because he was chosen to represent the monsters. But Roach thinks he's still stronger and explains that he trained under a waterfall as he continued observing humans, so his power is now unrivaled. He challenges Deke to a duel, saying he will replace Deke if he loses, and Tien thinks he should accept, but Sue thinks it's pointless. The first round is a test of strength, and they have to make the waterfall flow backward. Deke tries, but he hates water, so Roach calls him a coward. Roach gathers energy and punches the water with all his might, leaving them impressed. They go to a mountain, and Roach thinks Deke has no chance since agility is his strength. They start the challenge, and they play video games, but Deke wins, as he explains that he has been practicing in the human world. Roach recognizes him as a worthy opponent, saying the real battle is about to begin, and they prepare for a food battle. Deke thinks the most important thing is quality ingredients, but Roach explains that good techniques can transform any dish, and he's ready to show what he learned by spying on kitchens. The battle begins, and Deke tries to find the perfect ingredients, while Roach worries about controlling the heat. Someone rings the doorbell, and Deke opens his order, but he puts cat food in the bowl. Sue is shocked, but he says there's more, and he adds cat food from a can, so she yells at him. Roach thinks he will win, and explains that he used all possible techniques, but it looks disgusting, so she gets even more furious. They both end up losing, and Tien tries to calm her down. They talk about the next challenge, but Sue thinks it's stupid, so she tells Deke to just let Roach win so he can leave. But Deke explains that if he wins, he will stay at Sue's house as the representative of the monsters. She tries to think of him as her pet, but she becomes furious, so she uses a sheet to punch him, sending him flying. Sue and Tien have just finished shopping, but they can't stand the heat, so they try to avoid being exposed to direct sunlight. They finally get home, and Tien wonders why she wants to eat hot pot, because the heat wave is insane. She explains that they should eat hot pot in a cold room, so she turns on the air conditioning unit, but it suddenly breaks, and Sue can't believe what's happening. She starts hitting it, saying this is how humans deal with malfunctioning electronics, but it doesn't work, so Tien suggests calling someone. Sue thinks about the cost, thinking she can't afford it, so she insists it isn't necessary. He asks about the hot pot, but she decides to eat it anyway. Deke appears with a fish, and he asks about the air conditioner, but she ignores him and calls them to eat. The food is ready, but they can't handle the temperature, so they start melting. She mentions that this is how humans deal with hot weather, ordering Deke to eat, but he can't take it, so he returns to his cat form. Tien is worried about him and asks her to fix the air conditioner, so she calls a repairman. He fixes the air conditioner, and it starts running, but a god named King suddenly appears. Tien can't believe he's still in the house, because he thought the other gods were sold by Sue. She realizes she forgot about him, and Tien thinks she's cruel, since he was afraid to show up and kept hiding from her. But King mentions that she revived him, thinking she's a good person. She thinks it wasn't a big deal, but he explains that it's generous to spend her money on others, and he keeps praising her, so she feels over the moon. He also praises Tien for calling for help, so Tien explains that he didn't do much, but King insists that he's incredible, so he also feels great. Deke asks him to leave, but King insists that he's the best, so everyone's caught up in his breeze. They eat the hot pot together, thinking the air conditioner is the best invention of the 21st century. The next day, Sue wonders why it's so hot, so she asks King, and he explains that Tien likes it at 27 degrees, but she orders him to set it to 24. Tien thinks it's too low, but she tells him to deal with it, and King sets it to 24 degrees, but Deke appears, asking him to lower the temperature, so King agrees again. Sue thinks it's too cold, but Deke tells her to wear clothes that can keep her warm, so she tells him to shave his head instead. They start to argue, and Tien asks King to increase the temperature, but Sue tells him to set it to 24 again. King asks them not to fight, and he suggests another temperature, but Sue hits him because she doesn't want to give up. They continue fighting over the temperature, and King thinks he's the problem, but Sue tells him to shut up, and they curse at him. He's in shock, so he thinks about leaving, but they think about the heat, and they don't want him to go. King thinks they can't live without him, but Sue kicks him out, and they mention that he isn't necessary for their survival. But it gets hot again, so Sue considers using water to cool down, but Tien is in shock, explaining that Deke doesn't like water. They keep trying ways to cool down, but they don't work, so she decides to show the advantages of the heat. She fries an egg on the balcony, as she laughs like a maniac, so Tien thinks she has gone mad. King comes back to apologize, but they start crying and beg him to turn on the air conditioner. He asks them about their desired temperature, but they don't care, begging him to turn it on, as they mention that the air conditioner is the best invention in the world. We see a crack in space, and the gods are discussing that the field is weakening, so they need to fix it quickly, but they decide to leave it to the Chosen One, who is considered as the only hope for the universe. Sue is exhausted after a week of work, but Tien explains that everyone goes through this. She wonders what he means, saying he's never had to kiss ass or punch a time card, but he shows that they do exactly that. He explains that they need to understand the human world to protect the three realms from breaches in the barrier, but she mentions that they stay at her house waiting to be fed, so she turns away, thinking a barrier breach is nothing. But they explain that a barrier breach is when the void gets out of control, and as humans are made of energy, the entire world is affected. This also causes anomalies, such as things disappearing as if they never existed, which is why no one can remember anyone in graduation albums, but she thinks it's normal to forget that. She wonders if their work prevents these things from happening, but they explain that it doesn't, saying it's the job of another department. Deke explains that this is beyond their jurisdiction, but he assures her that a hero will appear whenever the universe is in trouble, so she tells them they're useless before returning to her room. Deke decides to leave, and he sees something, but thinks it's just his imagination. Sue thinks about what they said, so she searches through her things and finds her diary. She sees her graduation photo and realizes she can't remember the names of the people, but she doesn't think much of it. Moments later, a barrier breach appears, and the energy flows into her room. The next day, Sue wakes up in a good mood, but Tien wonders why she woke up so early. Deke returns home, and Tien asks about Sue, but they see her waking up again, and she goes to the bathroom, but they suddenly hear a scream. They realize that there are two Sues, and they start provoking each other, so Deke and Tien separate them, wondering who the real one is. Deke thinks it has something to do with the barrier, because he felt something yesterday. He explains that UFOs usually appear when the barrier energy gets out of control, but it seems that this time it's different. She asks how to get rid of the fake one, but the other asks why she wants to get rid of herself, and they fight over who the real Sue is. Tien thinks that as her cell phone, he can determine who the real one is, and he gives them a test, but after the test ends, their results are the same. He wonders why they both say they're 18 years old, and thinks the barrier energy split Sue in two, and reduced her age by half. But Deke doesn't think she was 36, and they start talking about her actual age, so the two hit him. He thinks they'll die like this, but Deke notices that they have different life mottos. One wants to be successful, while the other wants to travel the world, so Deke and Tien think something is wrong. Deke suggests letting them fight, but Tien opposes the idea, and the two start arguing again. Deke thinks about letting them combine by doing a fusion dance, but Tien says that isn't how it works. They decide to call Fu, and he explains that he sent reinforcements to handle the situation, but he didn't expect this. Tien explains that they need his help, because Deke's ideas are useless, but Fu thinks they should let the two fight. Tien is frustrated, and he just wants the real one back, but Fu explains that he can still feel Sue's energy, so he doesn't think she disappeared. They realize what happened, and they see Sue sleeping, but she gets angry, asking them what they did, so they both realize she's the real one. She wonders what's happening, so Deke explains that they appeared because of the energy disorder, but he doesn't know where they came from. Fu explains that reinforcements are already dealing with the barrier breach, so they should focus on resolving their situation now. The two doppelgangers start talking nonsense, but Sue recognizes their phrases, so she realizes where they came from. She shows everyone her diary, and the phrases match what she wrote, and they're surprised by how she used to be, but she explains that everyone is a bit weird in high school. She asks Fu what they need to do, but he explains that he can't do anything, because the two are technically a part of her, so she must come to an agreement with them. But they refuse to agree, thinking she's helpless now. Tien tries to defend her, but he only says bad things about her, so he gets punched. Deke thinks they're more energetic, and this angers Sue, so she tells them to do whatever they want and locks herself in her room. She feels sad, thinking she has become useless, while the other two ask who they will choose, but they defend her, and she overhears this, so she starts to feel better. Another barrier breach suddenly appears, and the energy goes into Sue's room, so another Sue appears. They realize she's younger, and she starts laughing like a maniac, thinking she traveled through time. She starts flirting with the boys, and declares that she will build her harem. Fu reads the diary, revealing that she wanted to travel through time and capture cute boys to build her harem, but she begs him to stop. The energy continues out of control, and they see her as a child. Sue cries in the corner, and more versions of her keep appearing from the diary, so she begs Fu for help, and he explains that there's another way to get rid of them, but she will need to release her contract, which means she won't be able to see people from the other world anymore. She's ready to accept, but he explains that she will lose her memories too, so she gives up, but the child bumps into her and makes her sign, so everything returns to normal. She receives a call from her mother, so she answers it, and Deke walks away. She returns to her normal life, but feels something strange, and one day she notices a cat following her, so she tries to take it home, but it hesitates and turns away. Days pass, and Sue wonders what's happening to her. She finds herself unable to sleep, and gets frustrated because she feels lonely, so she decides to clean the house and keep her mind occupied. She suddenly finds her diary and spends hours reading it. She sees something about her parents being from other realms and stories with Tien and Deke, so she starts to remember everything. Fu appears in front of her and explains that since she remembered, their pact is valid again. Tien and Deke appear, but Su hits Tien, asking him where he's been, but he hugs her, and she's also happy to have a cat again. But Fu explains that because they returned, her versions returned as well, so she yells at him, but Fu explains that she's the only one who can resolve this. They think she's too ordinary, and Su admits they're right, but she tells them that the world consists of ordinary people like her. She explains that she's their future, and asks them to accept it, because they're all the chosen ones, and she finally makes peace with her past. Fu congratulates her, and explains that she can still choose a normal life, but she feels that she can't live without her cell phone and cat, so Tien hugs her as she tries to get rid of him. Su's parents return from their trip, and they explain that they have someone important to introduce her to. Su has a bad feeling about this, but her father reveals that she has an older brother. She's speechless, but they explain that being the child of a god and a monster, he inherited powers from both. They explain that he's extremely powerful, so he travels through the 3 realms to deal with anomalies in the barrier. She can't believe what they're saying, but a flash enters through the window as her brother apologizes for making her wait. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.